Hi everyone, my name's Paul from Plan Your Patch. Welcome to the channel. So today we're out in the garden, as you can see, and it is mid-autumn and we're in the process of thinking about planting some cabbages, and I'm planting a variety that I have not grown before, and I thought that was a good opportunity to talk about all the different varieties of cabbages that are around and how you can take advantage of them as a gardener. So in terms of cabbages, they can be classified in two main ways. One is based on maturity time, and the second is basically on their physical characteristics. So if we're talking about maturity time, which is really the thing that's most important for your gardener, there are basically three classifications: early, mid, and late season varieties, which just refers to how long they take to mature. So late varieties can take up to about 150 days, so they're quite long maturing. Other earlier varieties can tend to be 110, 120 days to get a crop. Now, the other way that people refer to them as early, mid, or late is based upon when they're typically harvested. So if you're talking about if you hear the term summer varieties, they're actually also referring to early varieties. Now, summer varieties are typically planted in early spring, and by the time you're getting to mid to late summer, you've got yourself a cabbage that you can harvest. When we're talking about the mid varieties, they're sometimes referred to as winter cabbages, and they're planted around about the same time, so sometime in spring, and because of the maturity length, you tend to be harvesting them in late autumn or winter. So they're quite useful for going across the winter period because growth almost stops. Now, the third variety, the late varieties, are also useful because they can be used to mature at a different time, and they're referred to as spring cabbages, and the reason why is because they're planted in spring. Not planted in spring, planted in late summer, and by the time that they mature, then you're able to harvest them in the following spring. So the big advantage of having this spread of variety, which is much wider than other vegetables, is that it means that you're able to get cabbages to mature exactly when you want. So for example, I do know in the Victorian era with head gardeners that they would often talk about cabbages as a measure of how well the garden was managed. So if you could pick a cabbage from your garden any day of the year, that was a good indication. Now, the second way to to classify cabbages is based on physical appearance. So the most common one, which is what you often see in supermarkets, is just a green cabbage. Now, the green cabbages just almost look like soccer balls, that sort of size, and they're usually light green to deep green in colour. The second variety, which is also similar in colour but very distinctive, is your red varieties. So they're just they look quite different. They have that red tinge to them, and if you're really interested in, you can actually get your food to turn blue with red cabbages if you leave them in things like stir fries. I've had it actually happen. So what happens is there is a pigment within the red cabbage, which is also a pH indicator. And what can happen when you sometimes cook stir fries, if you don't add anything that's acidic, is that you can actually put it in the fridge and then you come back the following morning and it's actually turned blue. But the way to fix that is add a little bit of lemon juice or vinegar or something like that, and that'll fix the problem. The third variety, and most people probably have seen these in supermarkets, they're not as common, but they're certainly something that a lot of people are familiar with, which is a Savoy type. So a Savoy type is also green in colour, but it has a bit of dimpling, very, very similar to what you see from Tuscan kale. It has that sort of crinkly sort of appearance to it, and that's just a sort of, I guess, a subset of the green variety. Now, the last variety is Napa. So Napa varieties are basically Chinese cabbages. So this is the type I've got here at the moment. Now, those ones tend to be oblong in shape and very, very really pale in colour, and they'll often have on the leaves spines that are actually white, and that's what makes them distinctive. So they tend to get used in things like spring rolls and that sort of thing. In terms of how these varieties go across maturity levels, Napa are almost always early cabbages. The red cabbages, they're either mid to late cabbages. So I've got, I think Red Drum is a variety that I sometimes grow. That's a very long maturing variety. And then you might have things like Red Ruby, which are earlier varieties. The green cabbages, you can get a spread across the entire range. And then Savoy cabbages, most of them are mid to late varieties as well. Okay, and now in terms of when to grow them, as I said, cabbages are really, really forgiving. So you can plant them, as you can tell, all year round, but they do have a reputation of being a winter vegetable, and that's because they're really tolerant of cold temperatures, which means they can be grown in a lot of regions where it gets very cold in winter and survive. So they were a staple of the European culture for almost 1,000 years. But if you're going to sow them, it is best to start off with a seed tray. Put 2 to 3 seeds per per module in a seed tray. Plant them at about a depth of maybe 1 centimetre, half an inch, something like that, and make sure you keep them well watered. They're not the fastest vegetable to grow, and they'll take a little bit of time to come up, and then you need to pop them in the garden. And the main thing there is just to make sure you give them plenty of water, plenty of compost and that sort of thing, plenty of nutrients. But the key thing, if you want to make sure you get cabbages at the end of the day, is that you want to make sure that you protect them early on, because that's when they're most susceptible to slug attacks. So things like slug pellets around the seedlings to make sure that they're protected. The other common problem that you have is also cabbage white butterfly, which is a common problem. You can reduce the extent of that effect by using things like fleece that will prevent an infestation, or you can treat them with specific chemical varieties. Chemical products. Now, I hope that was useful. I hope you have great success with your own cabbages in your own garden. And if you enjoyed what you saw, please subscribe. Otherwise, I'll see you next time in the video. Cheers, guys. Have a great day.